The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, hello.
Okay. So, can you hear me, Brian?
Hello.
Can you hear
Hello.
me? Okay. All right, Brian. Ooh.
Hello.
I can hear you, Brian. Can you hear me? All right. Well, to all those who are kind of sitting out there and
Talking now.
I'm talking right now. No. Oh, no. I'm sorry.
Frank, again, I think we should do the telephone option. Please chat if you want me to do that.
Okay. Okay, so while Brian's getting everything all squared away, I want to apologize for starting a little bit late. We're having some technical difficulties on Brian's computer. He's unable to hear me or the rest of you for the Q&A session later. So what we're going to do is we're kind of just going to get it going, and Brian will begin the presentation. I'll give him a chat, and he'll get going here in a second. But I want to first of all say thank you for all of you for showing up today for this Best of the Best webinar series brought to you by Novedge, the design software superstore. We're really excited to not only present what's new in the Rhino 5 WIP, but we're also excited to have a presenter like Brian James. Well, there's some feedback there. I had the little technical issues there. As I was saying, we're really excited to have someone like Brian James kind of go through this WIP with us. I had the opportunity to meet Brian at SIGGRAPH 2010, and I was totally blown away by not only his knowledge but his skill at instruction. He gave me a 5-minute demo on how to use KeyShot with Rhino, and it was superb. So if you're unfamiliar with Brian, he's a training specialist for Robert McNeel and Associates, as well as a professor at the Rhode Island School of Design. Aside from being extremely proficient rather, at 3D modeling and rendering, he's also an avid photographer of HDR environments. Brian's going to kick this off here in a second. He's going to speak for about 45 minutes or so, and then after that we're going to open it back up for a Q&A. Unfortunately, we're not probably going to be able to do audio Q&A, but if you can just use the question feature in GoToWebinar, Brian will be able to answer those questions for you. And following that, we're going to have I got a really special announcement from Novedge that I think everyone's going to be into, so stick around. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, so bear with us 1 second while I let him know to get going.
Okay, Frank, thank you very much. Are you going to make me the presenter? All right. Let's see. Let's see. I'm going to try to show my screen now. Okay. So Frank, let me know if you can see that. Okay, great. So thank you everyone for attending. Sorry for the technical difficulties on my end. If there are any questions, please let Frank know, and he can text me. I'm watching that text window in the GoToMeeting interface, and I can stop and address any questions as needed. So this webinar is really about what's going on with the V5 Rhino development, and I want to just highlight a few things that are underway. But first and foremost, I want to point out that this is a work in progress, as our development process always has been. As soon as there is something usable, it is available to our current users, and they can try it and give us feedback on what should change and how it could be better. Version 5 is currently still in the work in progress, or what we call WIP stage. And in order for us to complete the product and start shipping it, we rely on the feedback of our users. So as you're doing any testing, we'd love to hear what you think about new features and whether or not we're going in the right direction. The first thing I'd like to pull up here is this web page, and you can see the address here. It's download.rhino3d.com/rhino/5.0/WIP for work in progress. And this is where any current Rhino 4 user can download the work in progress build. You also have the ability to scroll through here and see what new stuff has been added in every release. So there's actually one that happened quite recently. And you can see what new features, bug fixes have gone into that release. And scrolling down, you can just briefly read through and find out whether or not there's something that you've been waiting for a couple of years, and hopefully it's in there. So this address, again, is the place to go if you currently are a Rhino 4 user, and you'll be able to test this work in progress. Now, we're not in the beta stage yet, but hopefully that will happen soon, and that is our latest goal. The big things for Rhino 5 are listed right here in the beginning of this web page, and one of the main things was speed and display speed improvements. That was a main focus for us in the V5 development. Another big advance is that we have a 64-bit build now available in this work in progress build of V5, and that allows for larger data set access in terms of RAM. And there's a misconception that it's going to make all functions faster, but what it really does is it lets you not run out of memory when you're using Windows. So if you ever have encountered that error, Windows has run out of memory, the 64-bit build is for you. A lot of our architecture customers or people dealing with very detailed marine models have already started to use the 64-bit build, and it's been invaluable in their process. I'm going to cover several different areas of V5's work in progress improvements and new stuff, but by no means will I be able to get to everything in this webinar. So you can feel free to contact me afterwards, or just shoot anybody at Rhino an email, and we'll give you an answer if there's something not covered that you found in the WIP that you're curious about. So this is the 64-bit build of V5, and it looks just like the 32-bit build, except up in the top left-hand corner you'll see it says 64-bit. I'm running Windows 7 64-bit, and I've been using this build and testing the work in progress every week for months. Probably about 6 months, and it's very, very stable, and I've done whole models in it. So I'm going to go through a few different things here. The first I think I'm going to jump into is one of the features that I find to be really interesting in the V5 development, and that's what we call shelling. Shell polysurface and offset polysurface are the two commands. So here I've got a polysurface, a closed solid, and it's got some fillets on it, you can see, and it actually has several different surfaces here because it was symmetrical. So I modeled it in a quarter and then mirrored it across the x-axis and then mirrored it across the z-axis in order to make the part that you see here. So shell polysurface is the command, and you get a thickness option. So I'm going to type in a thickness for this model, and then you get to pick a face or faces. And that's quite nice here because of the symmetry that I have in the model. I get to pick these faces rather than just a single face. So we could make this hollow all the way through if we wanted to. And shell polysurface, what it's going to do is it's going to take the model and it's going to offset it inward. And if you have a sharp corner like this crease here, when that gets offset inward, you'll get a fillet as a result. And that's really the result if you're going inward. If you're going outward, then you'll get a larger fillet. Now, there are definitely cases where this doesn't work. The cases where it does work, and I'm just going to undo here so I can, or actually I can just point out what I'm talking about on the back side for a second here. Case where it wouldn't work, for those of you who dive into this and start testing it, is if we had a fillet along this edge. That case would currently not be handled due to what we would call a self-intersecting surface. So if you're going to shell something, have a hard edge like this, and think about it in terms of a straight extrusion. If it seems like it would make a straight extrusion just entering through that face, then you will be able to shell it most likely. Now, thickness and geometry also play a factor. So in this demo model, when I was experimenting with what thicknesses would work, this little area right in here was a little bit of a problem at certain thicknesses. And you could, of course, as many Rhino users know, you could split faces out and hold on one second, just reading Frank's comment here. I think I covered that already. V5 is not out. V5 is a work in progress, and this is totally a work in progress software. It is not available. Okay, all right, I'll continue. So the and the release date is unknown. So the work in progress is free for all V4 users. Try it, let us know if we're going in the right direction, and we don't know when we're going to release it. So back to the demo. We've got, I see somebody said I was stubborn there. So back to the demo. We could have a problem here at certain thicknesses, and that really has to do with geometry. So when you're testing the shell polysurface command, make sure to think about how thick something would be normally if it were an injection molded part or a stamped part or something. And if you try and offset past a certain amount, you may need to do some manual modeling to get it to work out. Now, if I undo that and undo shell polysurface again, I'm going to grab the other side of it as well, just to illustrate the fact that you can make this whole thing hollow at one time. And then I'll select it, and I'm going to run one of my favorite commands, the what command. And just to show you how much this rocks, you can see that it is a closed solid polysurface. So although you could do that manually, and many people that use V4 do this kind of thing manually, there is now a command that allows you to do it in V5. Now I'll undo that, and I'm going to extract just 1/4 of this to illustrate a different command that is quite similar. So I'm going to run the command extract srf. I'm going to grab all these guys, join them back together, and then I'll hide the rest of it. Okay. And maybe I'll extract these guys too and just get these out of here, just delete them. Okay, so I've got a polysurface like this, and it's not a solid. So shell polysurface isn't the right command for this. Instead, there's a command called offset polysurface. And as many of you will have known from using V4, you can offset a polysurface in version 4. However, you're going to get a whole bunch of different solid blocks and all the intersecting walls in between. I see a question there. The command to check a model is simply what, W-H-A-T. So the offset polysurface command is going to allow you to pick options up in the command line, so whether it's inward or outward, and this has to do with the normal direction. So I'm going to say yes, it will be inward, yes, I want to join it, and the thickness I'll leave. I'm working in inches here at 1/100 of an inch. And there is our offset. I'll go into ghosted mode here so you can see this more clearly. And so you can see where we have one radii, we get a different radii because all the surfaces get pushed in, so we get a different sized fillet right there. Actually, it's the same radius, isn't it? But it's a different sized fillet right on that edge because things have to intersect and trim. So there are many cases where this won't work, but it's definitely in a usable state if you follow the rules of no self-intersecting surfaces. Let me see here. I think we have another question. I lost a little surface in the corner. I actually didn't have a little surface in the corner. I must have deleted that at one point when I extracted. Maybe I didn't grab that one. Good eye, good eye. Let's see. Make the offset bigger. If I make the offset bigger, it probably wouldn't work. I know that from experimenting with this. It wouldn't work right in that part that I pointed out, right in here. And that is what I would have to manually then split out and do another sweep or something like that to cap that area on the B side. Good question though. Will there be no solid option similar to mesh offset? This is as close as it gets to the solid option for mesh offset. Offsetting a mesh with the solidify option is a much easier thing to figure out than with polysurfaces. You could, of course, always use the command extract render mesh and then use the offset mesh with the solidify option if you were fine with having a mesh solid. Let's see. What about an offset that is larger than the fillet radius? Will it make a sharp corner? Yes, ideally it should. Good question again, though I'd encourage you to test it on the model that you're curious about. And by all means, send it to me and let me know if you really think it's something that should work just based on logic, and we'll try and get that case covered as well. Okay, I'm going to move on past the shelling stuff. I know that's an exciting area, but I want to show you some other stuff too. So let's go on, and I'm going to open up, let's see, I'm going to open up a simple table model here. Okay, and I want to show you a couple interface things as well as a new editing command that's in Rhino v5 WIP, the work in progress that I'm showing here. So I'm going to hide this tabletop here, and here I've got a poly surface, and if I flip it over you can see we've got this fillet on the bottom of the pole for the table. Now there's a new command in v5 called solid point on, so it's solid pt on. And solid point on will turn on points for polysurface. As many of you know, working in V4, if you try and turn on control points with points on or the F10 key on a polysurface, the command line will prompt back that you can't actually turn on control points for polysurfaces. So solid point on is a road to making that a much more pleasurable experience, and this allows you to create points for a solid object. Now the editing that you can do with these is limited to what makes sense for that shape. Here I'm going to combine just this 2-point selection for the solid, and I'm going to drag down with the control key to make this smaller, to make it shorter like that. I'm going to turn off my grid snap for a second, undo that edit, and show you a new manipulation tool which is quite nice for working in the perspective view, and that's called the gumball. It's down on the bottom of the screen. You just embolden the gumball section, and now you get a manipulator object for whatever is selected. And I can left click and drag on this to drag it wherever I want, but I can also just left click and release over one of the translation axes and type in a value. So if I type in something like -3, it'll go down -3 units in the z-axis. And now that's really handy because I could turn back on the tabletop, select the tabletop, and move that the exact same amount and know that it's still going to match up. Now if I zoom in with my solid points on the bottom, I want to explain a little bit about what's going on here. With the manipulator object here, I'm going to drag this up. And what you'll notice is that this is different than either a scale 1D or I suppose you could use like stretch, but stretch would increase the isocurve density of the polysurface. Scale 1D would create an elliptical blend here rather than a circular radius along this edge. So what solid point edit or solid point on lets you do is it lets radiuses remain radiuses, fillets remain fillets. And that's a really nice thing if you don't want to change shape but you just want to change dimensions. And so that's the solid point on tool as well as the gumball. A couple other things with the gumball. I'll open up, or I'll just right click over the word gumball and go to settings. And what this does is it opens up the exact same page in options, modeling aids, gumball. So the gumball is a new modeling aid in V5. Oh, I got a couple more comments here. Let me just address them real quickly. Will there be a variable thickness option for the, I believe that's for the offset polysurface. I believe it's a feature request, but I will ping the developer again for that, and hopefully it will be possible. Not sure if it is. And a comment, love it. Thank you very much. Okay, so these are the options for gumball at the moment, and we've been talking about adding a couple more. So if you use it and you think that there are a couple holes in what it could do, then please let us know. But you can turn on snappy gumball, which would respect object snaps. You can leave it on smooth, you can change colors, etc., etc. And so I'll cancel out of that. One thing I do want to bring up here is that if I zoom in here, hopefully you can see this, there's a little white line here and a little white circle. If you aim your cursor right over this little white circle and left click, you can access the same right click menu that you do at the bottom. And let's see, we have relocate gumball is the thing that I wanted to pick out here for you. So I'm going to turn on snappy dragging, and then I'm going to say relocate gumball, and let's turn on object snaps near and relocate that gumball, and then mouse over the very center, drag it, and I'll get near snaps. Now wherever I leave it, now that's the new location for translating with the gumball. It took a little bit of time for me to discover that one myself, so I'm just putting that out there now. And there's also a reset gumball, which will set it back to the center of the object. Let's see, a couple more questions. Do you support the same shortcuts as the gumball in T-splines? I believe that gumball supports the Maya shortcuts. No, we don't that I know of, but perhaps it will be possible to change those to be custom. Let's see, can you use gumball to extrude faces? I'm not sure. I haven't tried that yet. We can try it right now for a quick second. Live demo. And let's do extrude face. Where is it? Or extrude surf. And no. So it doesn't go on by default at the moment, and I'm not sure if it ought to tell you the truth, just thinking out loud, because it will only do the normal of the surface, or maybe I picked the wrong command there. But anyways, experiment with it and send me a model if you really think there's something that should be different. Let's see. Question, could I introduce a little bit of the new features with texture mapping? I hadn't planned to, mainly because they're still actively being developed and not quite ready for prime time yet. Next question, can you give me the command for turning points on for polysurface? Solid point on, solid PT on. Next question, in T-splines, you just need to hold down Alt plus drag plus the manipulator. Yes, you can use Control and Shift and Alt with the gumball. I'm not sure if it does the same things as T-splines. Have there been any improvements to the animation capabilities in Rhino and V5? Yes, there have, and I'm going to try and get to that. Next question, does moving the gumball change how it scales the object? Yes, it does, and thank you for bringing that up, that last one. Who does my hair? The cheapest place in Boston. Okay, so let's see. The gumball here has several different manipulators. Translation are these arrows. These arcs here are for rotation, and then you've got these little boxes, the color of the translation axis on them, and those are for scaling. So it's basically scale 1D, or if you hold down Shift, it's scale 3D. And then you've got these little planes here that will move it within that color axis. So I'm moving just within the YZ axis if I drag within that plane. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. I encourage you to try working with the gumball. I'm totally addicted to it myself. And if you've used manipulators in other products, it will be fairly understandable, I think. And let's see, other questions. What was the command for validate model? That was the command what, W-H-A-T. Same thing in object properties, object details, does the exact same dialogue. Next question, moving the gumball acts as a pivot point, question mark. Yes, it is the pivot point for the object. So relocating the gumball with that option first will control where the pivot point is. Gumball allowed to scale in Z direction, absolutely. Here we'll do it there. Big, thick tabletop, and as you see, this is what I was pointing out about solid point on. This is no longer a radius because we've scaled in one dimension. That changed. Okay, I'm going to move on here, and I'll make time for as many questions as I possibly can here. Some other stuff that is in, let's see, some other stuff that's in the V5 work in progress is really selection stuff, and I've got a model here. I don't know how many of you will actually do something like this, but I've got a model here that is a scan of an old shoe last that I had in my house. It's like a wood shoe last they used to staple soles to when they'd repair shoes. And let's say for an instance here that we want to reverse engineer this model. I'm going to show you a couple things that make it a little bit easier in V5 versus V4, the work in progress of V5. Let's see. So the first thing is I want to show you that I'm going to go into shaded mode for all these. And shaded mode I've actually changed to have a custom property. So I'm going to open up options and go into appearance, advanced settings, and something new that's in the version 5 options panel. And there's a bunch of new stuff in here, but one new thing that's particularly helpful to folks that do tech support is that you'll now have a highlighted blue name for your shaded mode or for any display mode that has been changed from the default settings. And you've got to restore defaults here as well. So what I've changed here is I've changed the show mesh wires option for shaded, because when you bring in a scan, the scan is usually just a mess of vertices like this and can really slow down your display. So one of the first things I do when I'm ever doing scan work, reverse engineering work in Rhino, is to disable show mesh wires in the shaded mode and use that as my display. And that's just going to make the display flip around a lot nicer. Let me just catch up with a couple questions here. Whatever happened to sporf? You probably mean splop, but I'm not sure. It's still in there. Flow along surface is a different command. And let's see, what happened with the impressive real-time viewport rendering shown in Rhino 5? I'm getting to it. Patience. I'll be there in a second. Okay, so let's see. So I want to draw some curves, and so I'm going to utilize a new object snap, a new O snap in the V5 work in progress, and that's called vertex. And so the vertex O snap is essentially going to let you do the same thing as you could with point O snaps if you had the control points for the mesh on in V4. But this way we don't have to turn on the control points, so again we get a speed improvement for display. So I'm going to draw out some curves here. So I'm going to do an interpolated curve. And before I draw this, I'm going to do it the wrong way first, just to point something out to some people that might not know about it. So if I draw a curve and then I look in here, you can see that I snap to all these points on the other side of the mesh. So there's a command that I want to run first called cull control polygon. And cull control polygon will exclude any back-facing vertices or object snaps from the drawing of this interp curve. And this way I'm going to be able to just snap to vertices along here as I'm drawing this interp curve. So I'm just going to do it like that, and now you see I am good as gold. So I'm going to go along to the other side and draw another one. I'm not going to do the whole sneaker here, or it's actually a dress shoe. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I will do just a few to show you some of the useful stuff that's going on here. Now let's say I want to edit this curve. I'm going to turn on edit points rather than control points, and I'm going to turn off my gumball and say I'm going to click on these points. Now these points are coincident with the mesh, so we get that familiar selection menu, and that selection menu is just going to annoy me while I'm trying to edit this. So I'm going to use one of my favorite new things in V5, and it's called selection filter. And let me just type it correctly here. So selection filter is the command, and selection filter will bring up, let's see, where are they? There they are. Selection filters will bring up this choice of objects that I can snap to, and these work just like the O snaps. So you can left click to add or remove objects from the selection, but you can also just right click over one of them and that will be the only one selected. So I can choose just to select control points, and now as I move this curve around on the surface, I don't get that selection menu asking me whether or not I want to select the mesh. This is super helpful if you know that you're only selecting control points, but you need to look at everything else and you need to snap to everything else in the scene. So that's really what I wanted to point out with the reverse engineering workflow. For this particular section of the shoe, I would use network surface, and I draw a couple more curves across this way, one up the middle, and do a blend curve right there. But anyways, I won't bore you with that. Now to get back to being able to select everything, I'm just going to right-click over control points so that it's the only one not selected, and then left-click over it so that it too is added to the selection, just like that. All right, let me catch up on any questions. 1 second. Why technical view mode doesn't show hidden lines anymore? You need to use a command called tech toggle hidden lines. That will bring the hidden lines back for you. Next question, you need a big red sign that says select filter is on. Good suggestion. Send me an email, please, brian.james@mcneel.com, and I will add it to the feature. Let's see, will selection filter work on with a trap? Not sure I understand that question. And sorry if this is a little bit odd, but I'm trying to answer questions as they're poignant. Let's see, is there a way to cull selection of control points when editing a surface or mesh? I'm not sure I understand, but feel free to email me. Again, I don't want to get sidetracked too much here. With an example model, if you send me something, I'll definitely get back to you. Let's see. There's no scissor icon on the toolbar. How to make icons on the left side larger. Okay, I'll cover that stuff in a second. My email address, again, is brian, B-R-I-A-N, .james, J-A-M-E-S, @McNeel, MCNEEL.com. Next question, does nudge still work with selection filters on? Yeah, I believe it would. That's just holding down the Alt key and the arrow, I believe. But yes, yeah, that should definitely still work. What was the cull command? Selection filter, I think, is what you're looking for there. What's the question? One word, selection filter. Will Rhino 5 be cross-platform software? I guess the easy answer is yes. We already have a Mac work-in-progress build out, and you can go to irhino3d.com and sign up for the beta group for that if you'd like. And it shares a lot of the same core code as the version 5 work-in-progress that I'm showing you. But not all these new commands, if any of them actually, are in that build yet. So don't think that it's actually a mirror copy, but there is something for the Mac that is available now that you can start testing if you'd like. Next question, is it possible to bring into V5 transparent and gradient hatches? I don't know. I think so. A lot of work has been done on hatching and hatches in V5. I know that that was a recent subject of conversation. I would test it in the work in progress build and see if it meets what you're actually looking to do. And if not, let us know and we'll try and get it to work for you. But I know we've done a lot for hatches. Okay, so I want to address a question real quick about the icons, the toolbars. And so what I'm going to do here is just go up here and talk a little bit for a second. One thing that we're doing with the version 5 work in progress development is we're changing the UI slightly so that you now, instead of having a toolbar, you've got these tab groups, and within the groups you can put as many tabs as you want. And these tabs are very similar to toolbars. Your commands for options, you just right-click over some empty space and you can go to Workspace Options and you can change the size of the icons. You can also create a new tab. You can do a lot of things here that are similar to what toolbars did in V4. You can float them off and you'll see that standard toolbar or standard tab is no longer in this group up here. So I can put it back like that. And you've got this sidebar here, and the sidebar will change with some of these. So what we're looking at is actually creating some different sidebar tools that relate to what you've got up top here. So there's mesh tools, and you can actually display tabs vertically as well. You can choose in the options whether or not to have text as well as an icon, or you can choose to hide single tabs. Single tabbed groups. So that's what's happening here. This is a single group, single tabbed group, and so we've hidden the tab there. But again, all your options are just right click here next to some empty space and you can assign a whole bunch of different stuff. It's quite different than V4 and we're hoping to make it a lot better workflow wise, so please give us your feedback as you're using it. Another thing that you'll see is there's this new in V5 tab. These are things that won't have icons yet, and you can also go through here and experiment with stuff, comparing the notes to what you see in that work in progress page that I pointed out at the beginning of the webinar. Let me just go back to the questions here for a second. They're kind of on fuego at the moment, so I want to just jump back here and make sure I cover what's being asked. Will the Wenatchee version get any of these new commands? Email Marlon, the lead developer on the Mac project. He's got a whole game plan for the Mac UI, and in my understanding it hasn't really even gotten to that stage of development yet. He's still just hooking everything up, and then he's going to make it massage the UI, so to speak. So any feedback that you have about what the Mac version should be, I'd say direct that directly to Marlon Prowell, and you can get his email on that irhino3d.com site, and he's on the forums there. Next question, ribbon interface. I've never called this a ribbon interface, but maybe that's what it is. I've been calling it tabs. Next question, any plans add sweep rail in record history? I yelled at some developers just the other day about that one. I'll really try and get that done for you. Let's see. Next question, the tab bar changes upon hover. Is there any way to turn this feature off? Yes, there is, and I turn it off. You can see I've turned it off immediately. I forget exactly where it was. Maybe it's in Workspace Options. Show toolbar on mouse over tab. Yeah, I uncheck this every time I install a build that overwrites the preferences. Let's see. Sidebar is kind of an odd paradigm. What do you think it should be? Please let us know. Let's see. Will Rhino v5 render support Brazil for Rhino materials? Yes, Brazil for Rhino will see any Rhino materials as basic Brazil materials. They share a lot in common. So if you're doing stuff for the V5 renderer and you work all in basic materials because that's the only material you have to use, in the Rhino renderer, Brazil will support those. Let's see, no player for 64-bit to watch help videos yet. Yeah, that's something we've been talking about. That's really not in our hands to control. I think it's more of a browser Flash Adobe conversation. But hopefully there'll be a way to satisfy what you're asking for. I think I know what you're asking for. Next question, the RIB interface is Autodesk Microsoft Paradigm. Okay, I'm not familiar with it, but thank you for pointing that out. Next question, or I'll try and just do questions rather than statements, but show us mesh repair tools, please. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So let's do a new file here, and I don't actually think I have. Oh, what am I talking about? I've got a mesh right here. So mesh repair tools is basically same thing that was off of labs, but now it's integrated into V5 work in progress. So there is there's a command called mesh repair wizard, I believe, or the command is just mesh repair, and it'll ask you to select a mesh. So we'll click this mesh, and then we'll click check mesh, and it'll give you details about that mesh, and there's a little next. So you click on next, it'll tell you what's wrong with it, how many disjoint pieces, duplicate faces. You can also just click on repair here, or you can keep going next through the different options. Now one of the things that is misunderstood about mesh repair is that there are two different ways to fill a hole, and one way is curvature-based, to like match the curvature across the rest of the mesh around that hole. Rhino doesn't do that. It will do the shortest path across that hole, so it really is a dumb hole filling mechanism, but it is in there. You can also fill small gaps, things that don't appear as holes but are very close in terms of edges. And you've got choices as you go through here for a whole bunch of different things. Now, it should be noted that none of this stuff is really new to Rhino. It's just a new way to encapsulate a whole bunch of features together. So that's really what the mesh repair is. And I will not waste time trying to repair this mesh. I scanned this from, I think, 4 different views using a Next Engine scanner, and of course, you know, it's got lots of problems, but it was good enough to reverse engineer it. So I just left it good enough. Let me catch up on some questions here. Are the new toolbars available for plugin developers? You'll have to talk to one of the developer geniuses in Seattle. Dale Fugere would probably be the guy I'd put you in touch with, but email me and I'll put you in touch with him. Can world coordinate system mapping be shown in the viewport or exported? Yes, it can be displayed if the render engine that you're using supports it, and then the render mode will also support it. Scissor icon, I believe you're looking for like cut or something. I think it's somewhere in here. There, it's right under the folder there. Just left click and hold and you'll see the scissor icon for cut. Control X being the hotkey. Let's see, why does 3D connection drivers are inserted now as Rhino plugins? They're trying to make their devices work better in Rhino. If you've tested it, please let us know, or better yet, let the plugin developers at 3D Connection know whether or not it's going in the right direction. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on fairly quickly here and start to show you some other stuff in V5. I want to point out some of the display enhancements that we've done. So here I've got this model of just an espresso maker, and I'm going to go into a new display mode that's available to you in the viewports called rendered shadow mode. And rendered shadow mode does just that, puts shadows in the viewport. Now a lot of this is graphics card dependent, so if you've got a really huge model and a really big scene and the shadows don't look right, you'll probably have to change settings for it within the options panel. And you can go into the display mode that you're in and change the settings for rendered shadow mode under the shadow section. So there's things like the shadow map size, number of samples, the self-shadow bias, say that 3 times fast. Lots of things that you can change here that will affect how your graphics card deals with a specific scene. So just keep that in mind. There's a shadow section per view style under advanced settings now in the options. Now here I've got just some basic Rhino materials applied, and what I'm going to do is just open the material editor so that you can see 2 things. One, a new material editor in V5 versus V4, and if you've ever used Brazil for Rhino, this will look terribly familiar to you because it's the same code. And this is where I'm adjusting material properties here in the viewport. So what I can do here is I can select this object, and I can see that this is the material. It gets highlighted on the corners, and this material has a color, and it also has a gloss color, and here we're working in the limitations of the Rhino basic material, and it's very simple. And one thing that it lets you do is set things like reflectivity. So if I go down here to, if I select this cup here and go back up here, this is the material for it. I can see that the reflectivity value is 20%. Now what is that reflecting? And this is a really cool thing in V5 display-wise for rendered shadow mode, is that it's reflecting the current environment. So if I go over to the Environments tab, you'll see that the environment is just this default basic environment, which is a gray color. You can add an HDRI image, a high dynamic range image, to the background channel for a basic environment. So if I make that the active environment, that active environment is now going to be what's reflected in any of the basic materials. So rendered shadow mode has HDR reflections, which I think is really useful. Now of course we need some sort of ground plane here, and one nice thing that you have in version 5 is you've got these docking tabs now to control different visualization tools. And so we've got something like the ground plane. And the ground plane is going to be a global ground plane that I can turn on, and then I don't see the bottom of that environment. Like that. So pretty cool, huh? Let me just get back to the questions at hand here and see if we can catch up. Let's see. Real-time viewport mapping with correct tiling display. Definitely a big thing that we're trying to get right, so please let us know where it's wrong. Viewport mapping and how textures are tiled has a lot to do with the active render engine, but we definitely like to nail it for McNeel render engines, which we can control. So let us know. I know if that is, I see Dave SCH, so if that's Dave Schultz, I know you're a V-Ray man, Dave, so get on ASGViz and see if maybe they can do better tiling in the viewport. I haven't tested it in a while, so I'm not sure where they're at with that. Next question, how to show the new material editor in V5. Go to the Render drop-down menu, Material Editor, or you can go into a docking tab and click Materials, and those docking tabs will nest together. It'll access the real same thing. I just chose Material Editor right there. Let's see, next question, how about a simple shadow and reflective floor like Alias? Is that possible? I don't use Alias, so I'm not exactly sure what their reflective floor is, but you can assign a material to the ground plane, or you could just put a plane there and make it reflective. It will reflect the environment, but it won't do reflections of the object because it's not ray tracing. Next question, can you use Oxpecker in V5? I haven't tried it, but I can do better than Oxpecker in V5 using HDRIs. Oxpecker was environment maps, and the HDRI reflections I find pop a lot more, but maybe Oxpecker would work. I haven't tried it. Does material in HDRI work with V-Ray engine? I haven't tried it. The HDRI that I'm using in the Rhino basic environment would not be respected, is my best guess, by V-Ray. Let's see, can you turn edges, edge curves on? You can change the display mode for rendered shadow to display isocurves, if that's what you mean, or edges. Can't get Brazil to load into V5. Email me or post a question to the forum. And I've been running it in both the 32 and 64-bit build, as have a lot of people, so we'll definitely sort you out there. V-Ray for Rhino WIP 5 is not available. Yeah, I know. The V-Ray guys are not going to port the plugin until I think we release 5 is the last thing they told me, but you can email them and tell them to do otherwise. Brazil icons are not showing but isn't present. This must be terribly chaotic to listen to. I apologize. I'm just reading these questions. Let's see. You're going to have to email me any Brazil questions or post them to the forum. I don't have time to cover them here. I apologize for that. Let's see. Yes, you can use bump maps with rendered shadow mode. They really pop if you use an HDRI in a basic environment. Let's see. Will the materials be comparable with Maxwell Render? Again, it's a render engine conflict. Maxwell Render would need to be respective of the basic Rhino material and the basic Rhino environment, and they are not at the moment. Experiencing problems with losing texture maps from session to session, please email me a file, or if you have a more local tech support person in your time zone, email them the file, and we'll definitely get it sorted out. Okay, I've got just a ton of questions here. I really can't get to them all. You guys are swamping this chat here. And if I had more time, I definitely would get to them. I see one. What's your email address again? brian.james@mcneel.com. And you can email me, and I'll definitely help you out. And one question: can we move on? Answer: yes. I'm going to open a new file that shows the abilities of the V5 64-bit capability. So I'm not saving changes to this, and I'm going to open up this big kind of loft space. So it's going to take a second to open. This is, I think, a 250 megabyte file, and what I want to show you is another capability of rendered shadow mode. So rendered shadow mode has an option for something called the skylight, and this is kind of like an ambient occlusion, and it works really well for interiors, and you can turn that on in the sun settings. So if I go into the docking tab sun, Rhino actually has, in V5, there's a sun object now, and within that there's a skylight section. So if I turn off the skylight, you'll see what I get just by default. And if I zoom out of this little building here, you'll see that it's rendered shadow mode. So this is just like a really giant object in rendered shadow mode. But if we're on an interior shot and we want to visualize it, we can't actually see any shadows because we're in the shadows of all the walls within this space. So skylight, if you turn that on, gives you this ambient occlusion kind of shadow based on distance of objects. And I find it's really useful for interiors. Now, of course, there's some tricks that I'm doing here, and I'll just cue you in on what those are, kind of oxpecker types of tricks, and that I'm using environment maps in materials to make these look reflective because, again, there won't be ray tracing happening here. It's just on the graphics card. And what you're capable of doing has a lot to do with the scene combined with your graphics card. So that's going to determine whether or not you can rotate quickly or slowly. Let's see here. I've got some other layers, so I'm going to go into my layers docking tab here, and I'll turn on some living room furniture here so that you can see some other stuff. Let me select that, zoom selected, and you can see that you can assign a gloss color, and you know, it's actually pretty good just for visualizing a space without having to actually do the rendering. And if I display, I've got some stuff in the yard out here, so I'm going to display, oops, I'm going to display some yard furniture in here, and I'm going to turn off the skylight. There we go. I'm going to turn off the skylight, and I'm going to turn on the sun. Because the Rhino sun, I just want to cover this one thing, is that you can manually control it or you can globally control it. You can pick a spot, time of day, time of year, but you can manually control it as well. And if I manually control it, let's figure out where the sun is here. There we go. I can adjust the position of the sun. Now, if your render engine is something like Brazil, then this will be the position that the sun takes in the Brazil rendering. Now, again, Rhino Render will also respect the position of this sun. And Rhino Render will also use the new skylight option and give you soft shadows. So that is an improvement to just the base Rhino Renderer in V5. So let me see here. I think we are just about out of time, but I want to make sure that I address any serious questions here. So let me go through here and try and answer some more questions. Can you control the direction, quality of lights in shadow mode? Yes, you can create shadows from any Rhino light, so you could use a spotlight or a point light, and then there's control for the shadow, the color, intensity of the light, and the color of the light, and those are in the properties for that light object. Where do I find the V5 WIP forum on the web? Thanks. Let's see. I'll bring up that web page one more time. This is the place to download the WIP, and as far as a forum, it's pretty much the Rhino news group, but you could also email me, and I could send you the link for the Rhino news group if you don't find it. But this is where you can find notes about what's happening from build to build. Let's see. Next question. Animation, I'm not going to get into that here. Nice try. Let's see. Next question, do you have the Powerball numbers for tonight? Yes, they will be the same numbers used in the popular television show Lost. Next question, a pre-computed AO would be nice. Tell me about it. Next question, animation capabilities. You can use Bongo, and there's actually a new Bongo Work in Progress 2 is out, which has some inverse kinematic tools. Pretty cool stuff. If you already have Bongo 1, I believe you can use that. Let's see. Is McNeil's intention to release V5 within 2010? We don't know. We're basically just going to release it when it's done, and a lot of that depends on your feedback, so give us as much as you can. Some praise. Looks very impressive. Thank you very much. Let's see. Mac version 64-bit? I would assume it would be because the operating system is 64-bit, but that's a question for the Mac forum. Let's see. And it looks like we're pretty much out of time here, so I'll let Frank close up if we want. And again, my email address is brian.james@mcneel.com, and you can email me with any questions. Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks a lot, Brian. Unfortunately, we can't have any witty banter because you can't hear me. But once again, Brian, you'll hear this on the recording. Thank you. That was an awesome presentation. A lot of really cool new features, new insight into the Rhino 5 WIP. I want to thank all of you again for coming out and joining us here for the Novedge Best of the Best webinar series. If you're unfamiliar with Novedge, we're the leading online design superstore. Not only do we have the best prices around, but our staff is awesome, and we're only a phone call away to answer all your questions. I know earlier, before Brian got started, I promised a super cool announcement as far as Rhino goes, so here it is. For joining the webinar today, we're offering a discount on Rhino 4. All you need to do is enter the code that you see on your screen into your cart at Novedge, novedge.com, there, and you'll get $30 off. The cool thing about getting Rhino from us is there's no tax, shipping's free, and not only do you get the software, but you're also going to get Working with a Rhino, the book by Michael Vanderklee included in the package. So I'd also like to draw your attention to another bit of info that might be of benefit to you all. We kind of tend to go a little bit above and beyond for the CAD community, and one of the ways that we do this is by creating communities centered around different CAD products. What you see on your screen right now is Rhino Jungle. It's an entire community based around Rhino, Rhino plugins, and basically anything Rhino related. It's free to use. It's free to sign up. It takes like 2 seconds, and you can kind of communicate between other design professionals or design students. And you get instant access to all the latest info, trends, news, videos, tutorials. Brian is actually a member. He's pretty active, so you can hop on, post a question, talk to Brian, send him a message, and kind of just stay connected and collaborate with other professionals. Again, if you have any questions, my email is frank@novedge.com. We have this series is bi-weekly, so our next webinar is going to be the 20th, and that's going to be on real-time rendering with KeyShot 2.1. To get more information on that, head over to www.novedge.com/webinar series. You can see that on your screen right now, and register for that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we'll see you next time. We really appreciate everyone coming out.